Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining in. I'm Abhijit. I lead the business for Auth0 India, and I'm joining in from Mumbai today. So today I'm here to talk about federated single sign-on and how it can help you as product managers to acquire large enterprise customers. Now, before I get into the topic, let me quickly introduce you to Auth0. So Auth0 is an 8-year-old company. And what we do is that we are a SaaS offering ourselves for authentication and authorization for your apps as well as for your APIs. As a company, when we started off in 2013, we were probably the very early ones to think about identity as a service. And that's probably paid good dividends to the company because we got the early mover advantage. Over the years, especially in those days, people used to build the identity layer. But now, with more and more people having moved to microservices, people are looking to leverage a plug and play service like Auth0. And because of that, I think Auth0 has had a rocket journey over the years. We are now servicing about 17,000 plus customers, and we're managing about 5 billion logins a month. So that's a brief on the organization. Of course, today I'm going to talk about federated single sign-on and how Auth0 can help you achieve that. Right? Now, before I get into the topic, I think you as product managers, and I'm sure everyone is trying to acquire those large enterprise customers, right? But you know that if you are to acquire a large customer, besides the core features of your offering, there are a few other elements that you needed sorted. Especially if you look at elements around how are you going to provision the users? How is going to be the entire onboarding, the entire login and sign up process for the users? And then every enterprise customer is looking at how do I monitor the usage? How are you going to ensure compliance? How are you going to ensure the security aspects? And more importantly, data privacy. All these elements are usually critical for these large enterprise customers, right? And whenever you start any interaction, at least in my experience, what I've seen, that the enterprise customers will start off with a set of questions. So today I'm going to share some of those questions which I've myself experienced in onboarding large customers, and also talk upon as to how federated single sign-on can help address those questions. So to get started, I think first and foremost, when you're onboarding a large customer, the most important element is how you're gonna manage the user provisioning. And if I'm the CTO of a large organization, say I have 1,000 plus employees, and if I'm gonna be using a SaaS platform, I need to have a very well-defined user provisioning mechanism that I would expect. The last thing I would want is to kind of share that entire list of users on an Excel sheet, right? And that's what we see many a times, that we expect the customers to share the list of users in an Excel sheet, and then someone at your end will probably trigger a magic link-based process to sign those users up, right? Okay. But that definitely, when you're managing an organization, say of 1,000 plus employees, that's definitely not an ideal experience for the CTO of any enterprise. And more importantly is there is always that hesitancy, okay, on why would I want all my employees to kind of sign up and then you maintain separate credentials at your end, right? And the moment you're maintaining credentials at your end, it kind of opens up a can of worms, and that's where all the related questions come in, right? That how will you ensure the data privacy? How will you ensure the compliance aspects? How will you ensure security that the right users get assessed? So all of those elements come in moment you tell them, right, that I'm going to store all the credentials at my end. Further, what you realize is that for every large organization, they would ideally prefer to give their employees a single sign-on experience across their applications. And that is where the first question would be that why do my employees need to sign up? Why do they need to maintain separate credentials? Why can't you talk to my directory, right? So I, as a CTO of a large company, I have an employee directory. Why can't you talk to my directory service, okay, and give access to all my employees? And this is the starting of where Federation comes in. You'll also keep getting questions, okay, that, okay, if the users have to sign up, maintain separate passwords, okay, it's only going to lead to more friction. Because if the users are not using your platform on a regular basis, the chances are they will keep forgetting the password, okay, and then, they have to think about your forget password journeys, or if I have to reach out to someone to kind of activate my login again, so all of those obviously hampers the overall adoption of the platform and the user experience as well. Now, besides these, if I'm a large enterprise, what's going to happen is that my employee base, okay, or the users who are going to be accessing your platform, that's probably going to change every other day. So every other day, I'll probably be having new employees joining my organization, and they will need access again. And again, if it means a manual process of informing you guys that, okay, add these set of users, so all of that becomes a very, very tedious process, right? And not just addition, there can also be updation, right? For example, my role has changed. Okay, and if my role has changed, then maybe I need to be assigned to a different role within your application. So all of that, again, if it involves a lot of involvement, a lot of manual activities, it again leads to a lot of friction. And not just the addition updation, a bigger threat is an employee quitting. So what happens if an employee quits my organization? And then what will happen is that I will need to probably proactively go and inform you guys that, okay, please revoke the access for so-and-so user. So that's a manual process by itself. Okay, and God forbid, I mean, if the user is not deleted on time, there can be scenarios wherein the employee is no longer a valid employee, but still has access, and typical scenarios of any kind of fraud can also happen, right? If you're able to, if we see these kind of scenarios. So these are again major concerns on employee quitting and still having access. Further, I'm sure they're going to be questioned on, okay, if you're going to keep the credentials, how are you going to ensure that the right people have access? Do you have multi-factor authentication enabled? What are the different multi-factor options that you have? And all of those come up. Okay. How will you ensure that the user is assigned the right roles? So this is where it gets more complex, right? So it's not just about adding the users. Within your platform, you may have various roles, like role 1, role 2, role 3. And when I'm provisioning those users, adding those users, how do I ensure that they're being assigned the right roles? And every other day, the roles may change. So how do you kind of manage that entire role management, right, in your application? And last but not the least, another important point I've seen coming across is that how do I monitor the usage? So is there a mechanism to effectively monitor, who are these users who are accessing your platform? Okay, how frequently are they accessing it? Which devices are they accessing it from? And I need a complete transparency and logs of all of those activities, right? So all of these, so these are probably just a bunch of questions which from my experience I've seen that if you have to onboard large enterprise customers, these are some of the typical onboarding related questions that come up. And the good part is that all of these questions, there is one simple answer to address all of these points. And the answer is federated single sign-on. If you are able to roll out a federated single sign-on, then in a way, all of these problem statements get addressed at one go. So in the slide that I've shown you, it kind of depicts a typical federated single sign-on scenario. Okay, but before I get into explaining that, let me first explain what we mean by federated single sign-on. So in federated single sign-on, what happens is that whenever you onboard a customer, you will do a quick one-time integration with the customer's employee directory. And once you're able to do that, right, okay, then you can give an admin login to your customer, and the admin themselves can then add, update all the users. They can add all the users themselves in terms of whoever needs to have access to your platform. They can assign them to the relevant roles that needs to be. They can assign them the roles. And once that is done, right, then all the employees straight away get access to your platform and they log in using their corporate credentials itself. So in a way, they're not going to be having, there is no sign up or login process. There is no sign up process as such, right? And the login is also streamlined because it's an SSO experience wherein they're going to be assisting it using their corporate credentials itself. So that's a typical process of what we call as a federated single sign-on. And this, in a way, handles most of the problem statements that I mentioned. Okay, because if you see this overall journey, right, what's happening now is that since we are directly talking to the customer's directory and not keeping credentials at our end, most of your compliance, security, data privacy, all of those elements are kind of gone in a jiffy, because you're not maintaining any credentials at your end, right? Even a security, multi-factor, all of those are now customers' responsibility because we are now authenticating directly with the customer's directory, right? We are not keeping anything at our end. All of those elements are gone. That entire sign-up process, sharing the user details on an Excel sheet, all of that gone at one go again, because you're going to give an admin login. The admin themselves are going to be adding, updating the users. So in a way, you are delegating the complete provisioning, user provisioning process to them, right? Okay, that, okay, you yourself manage. And more often than not, the customers are also happy because then they have all the control, right? In terms of adding, updating. Even an employee quitting scenario is gone, because once an employee quits, they will be deactivated in their directory and their SS is automatically blocked, right? You need not do anything at your end. So if you see all of those, the major things which we discussed, in a way, kind of gets sorted at one go once you're able to do federated. However, federated single sign-on is not something which is really easy to implement. And the main reason behind it is that every customer you onboard, they have a unique setup. They will all have their own kind of a setup, right? So for example, you'll have some customers who are maintaining all the employee information, say in an Active Directory, or some may be using a Google Social Directory, or you may have customers using some of the other enterprise directories like an Okta or a Ping. There are scenarios wherein customers would be using some SAML directory or some LDAP supported directory. They may be storing it in some database like a SQL Server, Mongo. So the permutation combinations are kind of endless. There are various possibilities, which can happen, and you're really not in control of this, right? Because when you're onboarding a customer, you really don't know what your customer's environment is gonna be. So if you are to do it all homegrown, if you're going to be relying on your engineering teams to do all of this, what's going to happen is that every project or every customer that you onboard, will end up being a mini project by itself. The entire achieving the federation ends up being a mini project by itself because every customer's environment is different, right? And that is where Auth0 comes in. So we know that this is a problem statement. Okay, and from Auth0, over the years, we now have an exhaustive list of integrations already available. So whichever enterprise directory your customer will be using, or a social directory, or a database, or an LDAP, SAML, whatever you can think of, right? All of those integrations are now available out of the box if you're powered by an Auth0 platform. And since we provide the integrations out of the box, what's going to happen is that you can roll out the federation in real quick time in a matter of minutes. If you onboard a customer in a matter of minutes, you start talking to the directory and their employees can start accessing your platform, right? Further, another important thing is that if you are to use something like Auth0, Auth0 further simplifies, the entire adoption of the platform by providing you SDKs, software development kits, which are available in 65 plus technologies. So your apps, and it can be single page apps, regular web apps, native mobile apps, and they can be in any technology, be it, you can roll out Auth0 in really, really quick time using one of the relevant SDKs. So if your apps can be built on Node, React, Angular, Golang, Flutter, whatever you can think of, right? The SDKs are all available. So in real quick time, you can use one of our SDKs, and then the entire login box will be transformed. We'll be using the Auth0 login box. And this has the out of the box integrations with all the enterprise directories and all those combinations that I spoke about, right? So you can roll out the single sign-on experience for all your customers. Further, if you have a bunch of customers who are not ready for single sign-on, probably early stage companies or SMEs who may not have a directory service, and for them, you may have to continue with a regular username, password, or an OTP login or a social login and those, right? So those options are also available out of the box in Auth0. So in a way, using Auth0, you can cater to both the scenarios of customers who need federated single sign-on and customers who are still not ready for it, right? So both the scenarios can be tackled on it. So what Auth0 does is that besides the core feature of the federated single sign-on, we provide you a few more building blocks, which are again critical for or very useful for large enterprise customers. For example, if you see right in the box in between, I put in those bullet points, wherein the first point says is that customized login experience by customer. So whenever you're onboarding a customer, especially the large enterprises, they all expect a customized login experience with their branding colors and logos. And within Auth0, we have a very well-defined subtenancy concept, wherein every customer you onboard will be configured as a subtenant, or in our language, we call it as an organization. So every customer is set up as an organization, and for every organization, you can customize the login experience. So the login options, the entire look and feel, the entire flow, it can all be customized by customer to customer. And then we provide you the dedicated admin functionality, which is the admin login, which I was referring to earlier, wherein you give an admin login to the customer and it becomes more of a self-serve onboarding then, right? So their admin can themselves decide, who are the users who need to have access to your platform, okay, and assign them to the relevant roles, okay, and they can also update as and when required, right? So in a way, they don't have to come back to you guys at all. They are self-sufficient on their own ways. And this functionality is really critical, especially for you guys to grow and scale, right? Okay, because if you're going to be acquiring hundreds of customers, it's very important that you get them on a self-service mode. That's the self-service module. Then, of course, we provide you multi-factor authentication. So if you're doing federation, then you don't need this at all, right? Because you can rely on the MFA capabilities of the end customer. But if you're not doing federation, then for other users, we provide you multi-factor capabilities so that you're very sure that the right users are accessing your platform. Then multi-tenancy, which is again a critical element, especially if you're planning a global rollout for your platform. So if you're going to be rolling it out for the US region, for the European region, for Japan, and various other geographies, right? So what we do is, we have these public cloud environments in different geographies, and you can create different tenants in different of our environments. Okay? And that way is what happens is that all your US customers, you can create a tenant out of the US region. All your European customers, you can create a tenant out of the European region of Auth0. And this also helps you with some of the compliances, say like a GDPR, right? So from a GDPR perspective, they may want the data to remain within the region. And that is where having a tenant within the European region helps, right? So that's an important feature again that we provide, allow you to create multiple tenants. And each of these tenants have subtenants, which is the organization feature which I spoke about earlier, right? That it allows you to have those subtenants and those organization features. Then of course we do monitoring and logs, and this is available by organization. So the entire data privacy elements are taken care of in that subtenancy concept. And for every subtenant, for every organization, we kind of provide you the entire monitoring capabilities, and the logs are available, not just for you guys, but for your end customers as well. So your end customers get to see the complete usage of how they're using your platform. And in some cases, you can also link it to your monetization and billing as well. So it becomes a transparent process. Then the customers actually get to see how their users have been using your platform, and you can also link it to your billing. Okay, if it's a usage-based billing, right? You can do all of that. Auth0 also helps with single sign-on, wherein if you have more than one product, more than one application, then you would want to have a seamless single sign-on, right? You wouldn't want the users to kind of log in separately into different applications and a disjointed experience. So a single sign-on helps in terms of that once the user is logged in, the user can jump from app 1 to app 2 to app 3 without having to log in again. Okay, and it's a seamless experience, just like a Google or an AWS has achieved, right? So you jump from one service to the other without having to log in again, have a super app kind of an experience, right? And this also applies to third-party applications. So many a times you may not have multiple apps of your own, but you may be using some third-party applications behind the scene. Okay, and there again, it's very important that the end user experience is smooth, right? So that is where we'll also help you with those third-party integrations, so that the end user never really realizes what's happening. And then, of course, we help you with role-based access control, which is your authorization aspect. So again, authorization, while it sounds simple, depending on your product, you may have really complex authorization, different roles, different permissions, different rights for different users. So all of those can again be configured at Auth0 level itself. So we follow RBAC concepts. So basis role, basis attribute, basis hierarchy, basis group. Different people may have different rights. So we can define all of those roles at Auth0. And all of these roles will also be made available in the self-service onboarding, right? So they'll get to see all the roles and they can assign them respective roles. And besides that, from a compliance perspective, Auth0 environments are compliant with, an ISO-B, a SOC 2B, a PCI-B, GDPR-B, HIPAA-B, the tons of those compliances which we are already certified on. So this in a way kind of gives you an head start. Okay, and if you're looking to onboard these large customers, right? Okay, the last thing you want to worry is this entire onboarding process. And this is where Auth0 comes in. It helps you to streamline this entire onboarding journey. Okay, and with that approach, it can be, you can focus more on your core features, right? The core features of the product, and leverage a plug and play service like Auth0 to manage all of these elements. So this slide is just ticking the boxes. Essentially, if you look at the provisioning is sorted, the users do not maintain separate credentials. You are not going to be storing any credentials at your end. Compliance, privacy, all of that is taken care of. Employee adding, employee updation, employee quitting, all of those are kind of sorted at one go. Multi-factor, security elements, all of that stuff, just to tick in the box for all the questions which I had discussed, right? And this is kind of just depicting, that if you look at that identity layer, it's kind of at an intersection of what we say as convenience, privacy, and security. So all those three elements, okay, play a very critical role in the entire identity layer that you may have. Okay, and usually being the gate for any application, it is usually the place to make or break. Okay, and make or break a good impression with your end customers, right? So yeah, so that's what I essentially have to share, in today's session. I hope you found the session to be useful. I'm going to be around, on the platform, so feel free to, if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to address. And thank you for taking the time and listening to me. Thank you, guys.